growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Realtor Growth listeners. Today I have Eric Levitan, and you can hear my voice. We're getting to Eric, a little raspy because it's Padres baseball, playoff baseball. We got Eric over here. He's a Philly fan, so if this gets a little hostile, you'll know why. But if you're listening to us, I mean, later on, you'll know kind of the outcome, whatever it is. But anyways, let's get back to Eric. He is the founder and CEO of Vivo. Thank you, Eric, for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's I'd love to diverge into baseball if we have time, but I get contentious.
Yeah. So Vivo. I mean, I think one of the things, and we're going to get into like kind of what Vivo does is something that this kind of really relates to me, is just a simple fact. Fitness is basically what restarts my day. I mean, going to the gym in the morning restarts my day, and as you kind of age, you really see a difference between one 6-year-old and another 6-year-old. Someone that's working out or not. I mean, so your website and your company basically helps older generation kind of stay fit or even start their journey later in life too, right?
That's right. It is quite possibly the single most important thing that every human being on the planet can do as we age, which is really focus on our fitness, because so much of what the rest of life's experience is based on our ability to be mobile, to be strong, to be capable, so that we can live the kind of life that we want to live. And unfortunately, for so many older adults, it's hard, right? It's hard. We all know that fitness is good for us, but not everybody does it. And so finding something that works for you, finding something that takes something that maybe feels a little bit less accessible and making it more accessible, that's really what we're all about.
Yeah, I mean, and if everyone out there, it can get harder and harder later in life, but just do something simple. I had someone on the podcast previously that talked about their journey for 1 year was to do one push-up every day and add another push-up to that, right? And it was just something very simple.
That's right. And really, what we do at Vivo, and as it relates to talking about push-ups in particular, is we really try to focus on strength. And, again, there's this, I think we all have a pretty good understanding of how important exercise is. And a lot of us still don't do it, unfortunately. But I think there's a little bit less of an understanding about how important it is to build strength as we get older. And maybe one of the first things just to mention out of the gate is we all lose muscle mass and strength as we age. Every single human being on the planet. That is a natural part of the aging process, but it doesn't mean that's how we have to age. And so understanding the science of what's going on, the fact that we are naturally losing muscle mass and strength, it just means we have to reinforce that much more the fact that we can engage in strength training or resistance training or functional training, different terms for pretty much the same thing, at any point in our lives, whether we've done this in our past or not. And you can rebuild strength at any age, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. You don't have to be 25 to get stronger. And as a matter of fact, just the opposite. It's probably more important to get stronger as we get older rather than when we're younger.
Well, I mean, what's your elevator pitch for Vivo? I mean, if someone asks you because it seems like it can go a lot of different routes. I mean, is there a simplistic way of describing Vivo to people?
There is. And really at the end of the day, we are an online, but live and interactive small group fitness program that really focuses on building strength and function. And I think the two most important elements of that are, one, the fact that we're focused on building strength, which we kind of just talked about. The other is that this is online, but live and interactive. And I think because of COVID in particular, but certainly things were trending that way beforehand, a lot of fitness was moving digital. We were all familiar with Pelotons and Mirror and Tonal. And then there's a plethora of apps, right, that are out there to be accessible via mobile devices. We can go to YouTube and look at workouts. The one thing that all of those products have in common is it's either video-based content that you watch at your own convenience, or it's a live stream class, which typically is a one-way experience where I'm just watching other people do things and I do it myself. Those work really well for situations where you're really self-motivated, where you have a pretty good understanding of what you want to do, and you're relatively free of chronic conditions and pain and issues that you may have with your health. Most older adults don't necessarily have that foundation, where generally they need another human being who's a part of this experience, who can give feedback on form, who can keep you safe, who can make sure that they're conveying some foundational knowledge about what we need to do. Because again, this is such an important element. As we get older, we lose strength, we lose muscle mass. And so knowing the right way to approach this is really important. And every single individual has something going on. It may be a chronic condition. Maybe you've had knee replacement surgery or hip replacement surgery. You have osteoporosis. Maybe you just woke up that day and your back hurts or your knee hurts or your shoulder hurts. And we all experience that as we age. Well, having another human being in the room is such an important element to be able to provide that feedback. And on the flip side, it's also about social engagement, because we know that being a part of a group, being a part of a community, feeling connected, that's what drives behavioral change. That's what drives this habit creation. So our online live and interactive small group classes, that's really what it's all about. Is they're small enough that we're giving individualized feedback to everybody, but big enough that we're creating this fun, socially engaging kind of shared experience that makes people want to come back.
Well, I mean, let's rewind, I guess, to a young Eric. I mean, a young Eric, was he into fitness, or was it something you came on later in life?
So young Eric, I think young Eric was always into fitness, but never beyond just a hobby.
Okay.
I was an athlete in high school, and I even played a club sport in college. So fitness has always been a part of my life, but not a passion. It was more something that I had an acknowledgement of something I needed to do. I am a larger, tall guy that, whenever I'm 6'4", whenever you get into that situation, things tend to break down, mechanics tend to cause issues. So fitness, physical therapy, things like that were always just kind of a fundamental element of what I was focused on. But it wasn't until I watched my parents aging that I really started to understand the importance of this, is to see what happens as we age and the precipitous but also typical decline in quality of life that occurs. And it usually, there's this concept of stage, not age. I think we all tend to stereotype ages across the gamut, right? And I think you said it earlier really well. Not all 60-year-olds are the same. Not all 70-year-olds are the same. Not all 80-year-olds are the same. It's really for every individual person where you're at in that progression. But we do start to see in our 60s, from a physiological perspective, that rate of muscle loss that we experience begins to accelerate for everybody. And so the importance of really focusing on maintaining your strength, maintaining your function, becomes hyper important. And that's what I witnessed with my own parents. And that really influenced this direction that I've gone in with Vivo.
Now, this was always a hobby, the fitness kind of journey. Was when you're seeing kind of what's going on with your parents, does that mean that you started kind of venturing more into that network? I mean, were you doing this as kind of a side business? I mean, what was kind of that progression?
So I kind of got my start in the early 90s in consulting and IT, and worked for, back then, one of the big 6 consulting companies. Now I think there's 4. But really did that for about 10 years. And the more I progressed with my career, the more I realized I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I didn't want to be a part of a big machine. I wanted to tackle a problem and solve it, and really try and grow a business. And so at the time, I was very fortunate, buddies with a guy from college who had started his own company that was a software company and was just starting to really get some traction. And I joined him as an early co-founder, and really focused on growing this software and technology company. And it was actually in the television industry, having nothing to do with what I'm doing today. But we got really lucky. And we were able to grow this into a reasonably successful business that we actually sold to a larger industry company in 2013, and then actually stayed with the acquiring company till 2018. So for another 5 years. And that was a wonderful experience to grow and ultimately exit a business and have a little bit of success. But there were a couple of really key takeaways from that for me. And one was an acknowledgement that to grow a successful business, and especially to grow it to exit, There's a lot of good fortune that happens as a part of that. And I think as entrepreneurs, and for those of you who may be listening who are also entrepreneurial or thinking about this, we all want to think that we're the smartest, most hardest working entrepreneurs out there, and that's what really drives the success. And by the way, of course, that's a huge element to it. It takes a lot of work, a lot of grit, a lot of doing things that you might not want to do. However, there's a healthy dose of luck that's involved. Being in the right industry at the right time, getting those right first hires, getting those right first clients, getting connected with the right people. There's a lot of other elements that come in and really influence your ability to succeed. And for me, I really felt fortunate, and I wanted to put that good fortune back in the universe. And I really wanted to focus on improving someone's life. And it sounds really cheesy, but it's also really authentic. That really became my mantra: is I want to start another business, but I really want to make an impact. I really don't just want to start another technology company. I want to do something that would be really positive for the world. And at the same time that I was kind of having this introspective look at what could that mean? How do I do this? I was witnessing the aging of my parents, and my mom started having a series of falls, and my dad started having his own health issues. They both live in other cities. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. My dad lives in Philadelphia. My mom lives in South Florida. And to try and get involved with their lives and understand their health issues and be able to help in that in some way was really challenging. And the more I started learning about the aging process, the more I started becoming aware of the fact that A, we lose muscle mass and strength as we age, B, how detrimental that is to our lives, to our health and wellness and quality of life, and C, there's something you can do about it. But when you really look at the solutions out there, no one's really that focused on building strength and function with older adults exclusively in a way that really builds habit and behavioral change. And so that's really became the primary focus for where I thought I could have the greatest impact in this world.
Well, I mean, let's run it back for a second. So when you sold the company, you stayed on for 5 years, and then you left after those 5 years. Did you have those ideas or these ideas during that 5 year period, or was it after and you took kind of a breath and like, okay, what's next?
So I saw a presentation before I left, which it wasn't a TED Talk, but it was something similar to a TED Talk. And it was a neurologist who ran a pain center in Houston, Texas, who talked about the four cornerstones of aging healthy, aging well. And it was fairly intuitive for the most part, at least categorically. It was nutrition, exercise, sleep, and meditation. And I didn't know that much about meditation at the time, but certainly broadly knew about exercise and sleep and nutrition. But he spent an awful lot of time talking about the importance of strength training. And he introduced me to a word that I'd never heard before called sarcopenia. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, given what I do for a living. And most people have never heard the word sarcopenia. And sarcopenia, for your listeners, is the progressive loss of muscle mass and strength as we age that leads to impaired function. And it's literally what happens to us, right? We all know that we see it as we get more frail, right? As we get older, or doing activities of daily living gets harder. We tend to see changes in the way people walk, their gait, they start shuffling their feet, or we see people really struggling to get up out of a chair, and sometimes they can't get off of the floor. These are all telltale signs of sarcopenia. And it's one of those things that we just don't talk an awful lot about, but it is such a detrimental part of what leads to a whole bunch of issues with aging: falls, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, dementia, arthritis. All of these things are either caused by or significantly impacted by a loss of muscle mass and strength as we get older. But not a lot of people are talking about this. Not a lot of people are talking about sarcopenia. So I saw this presentation. It was really, really stuck with me. And as I started preparing to leave and really starting a new company, I just kept coming back to this concept of, why aren't more people talking about this? Why isn't there a solution out there that can really guide older adults and make something that is, seems challenging to do a little bit more accessible? And then, of course, COVID changed everything, because now it really brought to light the importance of providing interactive but online, accessible solutions to people everywhere. And so Zoom became a more ubiquitous skill, right? Older adults everywhere wanted to connect with their families, get online. It became something that was just a more of a standard accepted skill to have. And that really started to open up these thoughts about, well, I wonder if I could take an online program and deliver it to older adults in an effective way. And that's really the genesis of it.
So you knew that you were planning to start some company when you were leaving there. You just didn't know what kind of company it was going to be.
That's correct. And I actually had three ideas
Okay.
and kind of dabbled in all three as I was really trying to figure out from my own perspective where my focus should be. And Vivo kind of rose to the top pretty quickly.
What what process do you go through, right? And maybe the process is different now if you're going to start a next company to go, okay, is this a valid entity to go after, kind of company to build? Who do I need to bring on to help me build this company? I mean, what's the process look like?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and it's a lot to unpack there because certainly first and foremost, from my perspective and all of the experiences I've had and all of the various coaches that I've had, the single most important thing is this a nice to have solution or a must have solution? There's nothing wrong with nice to have solutions, right? There's a million of them out there. But things that are addressing core fundamental problems in society or in business are really the things that, from my perspective, is one of those litmus tests. And the fact that, again, this impacts every person on the planet, and this leads to so much of what that decline in quality of life is and diseases of aging and ultimately losing your independence. This is a mission critical problem to solve, right? We have a healthcare system that is ill-equipped to deal with the scale of the growth of population of older adults that we're seeing. We have the largest population of older adults the world has ever seen, and it's only getting bigger. There's something that we have to do to help address the health and wellness of our aging population. And so this felt like a really critical issue that wasn't a nice to have. This is something that we have to solve. We don't have a choice. So that was really the first thing is, can we have a problem that at its fundamental core is something that needs to be solved? And in this case, that was really the first thing. The second thing was, is there something that I can really do about it to make a noticeable difference? Because as you are probably well aware, and as are your listeners, there's a lot of fitness out there, right? It's a very, very crowded space. And when COVID happened, everybody went digital, and that became a very, very crowded space. And so can we actually differentiate ourselves? Are we offering something that can really have benefit? One of the things that led to, from my perspective, that really became a core fundamental part of our business is I wanted to prove to myself that this was actually changing people's lives. So we built in a measurement system. We actually do assessments for every new person that joins our program. We baseline their strength and their balance, and then we reassess every 2 months, also remotely over Zoom. And we do that as a one-on-one meeting where we take standard scientifically validated assessments and we execute them. And we see, for instance, how many times you can do a sit to stand from a chair in 30 seconds, how many bicep curls you can do in 30 seconds. We would baseline all of that, and then we'd reassess every 2 months. And very quickly, we saw that the results were off the charts. And to this day, literally 100% of people that have done our program have gotten stronger. 100%. We've never had one person who was baseline assessed and then reassessed who did not get stronger. And look, it's not rocket science, right? If you do strength training consistently, you will get stronger. That's the way the human body works. But that was a really important part of this, is not only are we solving a mission critical problem, but do we have something that's actually working? And so that became something that really became a part of what we do. And then finally, this was a space I didn't know a ton about when I got started. So what are the core elements that we need to do to be successful? We're dealing with older consumers. We're dealing with healthcare. We're dealing with fitness. We're dealing with technology. Where does my skill set come in, and where do I need to supplement that? And so that really, taking a look at the problem that we're solving, how do we differentiate ourselves, and how do we build a team of a kind of cross-functional skill set that would complement what I'm bringing to the table? That was really my process.
What's been harder in building this company, the aspect of getting an older generation to get back into fitness, or getting an older generation onto the computer?
So, and I'll even expand the question a little bit, because when I first started the company, I distilled this down into two core problems we had to solve. How do we get people to try it? And how do we get people to stick with it? And before I started this, before we really got into it, I really thought the hard problem to solve was, how do we get people to stick with it? and invested a lot of time and effort in building out what is now a very engaging, fun, sticky product that I can speak to a little bit. What I totally underestimated was how hard it was going to be to get people to try something like this.
Hmm.
Again, I think, and I think it speaks to both elements of what you asked in that question. There's an aversion to possibly technology, right? Getting online and experiencing something. And then there's this element of, again, we know exercise is good for us, but it's been a while since we've done it and we feel uncomfortable and we feel embarrassed. And it actually rolls up into what I refer to as kind of, it's really about shame. Is that for a lot of older adults, kind of not gender specific at all, is there's an element of not wanting to expose our weakness or our inability to do things in front of other people, and that prevents us from adopting things like this. So how do we really make this accessible? How do we remove some of that? How do we create a safe space for people to engage so that they do feel like they can try it? And we're still trying to figure that out. At the end of the day, that is, I think, the real core to unlocking so many new business ideas, right? Is how do you acquire customers in a way that get them to try what your product's all about? Because what we know now is that when people try this, they come back and they stick with it. But we just need to make it accessible enough that people try it and feel safe trying it. And that's kind of our biggest challenge.
Where do you see, if we were talking in 5 years, where do you see the company going?
So I think it's in two very different directions, but also kind of broadly coming back together. One is we started off kind of this proof of concept. Can we do this? For the first year, we really focused on let's get friends and family in. Let's measure all these outcomes. Let's make sure that we're having a positive impact. And we found out very quickly that we were, and then it was all about perfecting the program. We've built this thing up over the last couple of years, and now we've got customers all over the country. Now we're learning that what we're doing has clinical outcomes with real healthcare benefits, whether it's fall prevention or type 2 diabetes or osteoporosis or arthritis or social isolation. There's a lot of real tangible health outcomes and reducing cost of care that we believe is possible. We actually translated the outcomes that we've been working on for our business to this point, and we're actually working on a randomized control trial with the Duke University School of Medicine underneath a grant that was provided to us by the National Institute on Aging, where we're studying the impact of Vivo as a clinical intervention for older adults with prediabetes. One of the things that a lot of people are not aware of is muscle mass helps regulate blood sugar. And as we lose muscle mass as we age, that's one of the reasons that type 2 diabetes is a disease of aging. We know that by impacting and growing muscle mass, you can improve diabetic outcomes. So we're in the middle of this clinical, this randomized control trial where we're studying this. Well, let's integrate this into the healthcare ecosystem. And again, it's bigger than just type 2 diabetes. That's just the first disease that we've targeted. So as we think out next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we really want and believe that Vivo has a strong point of reference within the healthcare ecosystem where you can go see a doctor and a doctor will actually prescribe Vivo to you. Or maybe you're going through physical therapy for, post knee replacement and you're going through your exercises with your PT. Well, when you're discharged, you're often provided a sheet of paper with some exercises on it that I think we all generally know people may do for a week or two and then they probably never do again. Well, what if as a part of that process, you could say, hey, if you're having trouble being accountable to yourself, there's this program called Vivo that will continue to guide you through your recovery because you still have work to do. There's a ton of benefit and I think opportunity to put a program like Vivo that is very sticky, that is very engaging, that gets people to consistently exercise and focus on building strength, that can have a myriad of benefits for people in the healthcare ecosystem that are receiving treatment or preventing disease. So I believe there's this whole angle on healthcare that we really want to be a digital health company while continuing to pursue consumers off the street who understand the importance of health and wellness as they're getting older and need accessibility to a program like this. And then I think the more we can be successful in each of those, the more we'll influence the success of the other and ultimately really be a lifestyle brand where people come to learn about healthy aging with this cornerstone of online small group fitness focus on building strength.
What's the process when you have this idea, right, of going into the healthcare space and going to these platforms and or even the grant space where you're getting funding? I know in the government space, when you're looking for government contracts, sometimes you bring on a specialist that can guide you through the process. Is that something that Vivo had to do, or do you have someone on your team that specialized in it, or how does that work?
Yeah, we did a couple things. So I found out about there's a grant mechanism called an SBIR, or a Small Business Innovation Research Grant. And they're given out by a variety of government agencies like the National Institutes on Health, or the Department of Defense, or Department of Defense, DoD, or the National Science Foundation, the NSF. And um, once I learned about this mechanism as basically funded R&D that's non-dilutive, they don't take any part of your company. It was a really wonderful opportunity, not only to demonstrate that what we're doing has scientific efficacy, but to also have funded R&D to prove and execute these, these randomized controlled trials. That was a really interesting path. At that point, there were two people that I pursued. One was a consultant, like you just mentioned, who really understood, how do you build these grant applications? How do you apply for an SBIR grant? What does that mean? What's the whole process look like? And someone that could really guide us. And then we needed a research component of our company. And so got very lucky to get connected with a wonderful professor at the Duke University School of Medicine. Her name is Dr. Katie Starr. And she is in the Department of Geriatrics, has a world of experience studying exercise and nutrition interventions for older adults. And she really became a person that I could go to really help create this grant and really help create the concept of what a study would look like and help us navigate this. Because as you are probably well aware, that's what university professors are doing all the time, right? Is looking for those research opportunities. And so pretty quickly, we both proceeded down this path where, through the guidance of a consultant who really understood these research grants called SBIRs, plus a university professor and researcher who really understood how to create and define the research, I really leaned on both of them to help guide me through this process. Because you're right, it is complicated and it is no joke. It's not something that I would recommend anyone go into lightly. It requires a ton of work, even just to submit it. To submit a good grant, that's something that can be accepted, is even more work. And so you really have to kind of have your stuff together and make sure that you have the resources who understand how to do this, because it is not obvious.
When you're maybe if you were starting another company, or even when you did it here, right? When you're finding these paths of trying to find the right professor to work with or find the right consultant. I mean, I've had different schools of thoughts of here where people go, okay, I'm going to talk to everyone I know, throw it out there to the universe, see what comes back, or I'm going to hire someone to actually go find it. I mean, or you know what? I've already had these people in my Rolodex from years in the past, and now I know who to reach out to if this ever comes about. I mean, what process do you go through?
I was really the first. I'm going to connect with every single person I can possibly connect with. And in some ways be very shameless about it. And what I found out actually through this process, interestingly, is that's kind of my superpower, is this ability to connect with people and to establish maybe a little bit of credibility up front, such that they're willing to have a more meaningful conversation. And so I just got really good at reaching out to people. And even as I reached out to new people, saying, is there any, is this idea resonating with you? Are there people that you have in your network that you think I might benefit from learning from? And walking into every single conversation completely open. And again, maybe this sounds a little cheesy, completely open to the universe of what's going to happen, and not going in with a preconceived notion, and asking a lot of open-ended questions. Because what I found is, and I literally connected with hundreds, if not thousands of people through this process, is I learned something from every single person I talked to. I never had a conversation where there was no valuable input that was received. Sometimes it came in the form of people saying, I think this is a terrible idea, you shouldn't do it, right? Because that allows you to harden your conviction, to learn more about, why would someone doubt this? Why do they think this is not a good idea? Why do they think that maybe older adults can't get onto Zoom sessions and exercise remotely? Before I just reject that as someone who disagrees with me, let me ask them a bunch of questions about why they don't think that can work. Because when you learn that information, that actually feeds into how you help solve that problem. Because it's the people who tell you you can't do something or shouldn't do something that often give you the most valuable insight into how to protect what you're building so that it does work. And so I really got to a place where I recognized every single person I talked to provided value, whether it was feedback, whether it was insight, whether it was another connection. And so it just became kind of my process was I became this kind of voracious connector where I really enjoyed. I looked forward to it. It was fun to talk about this really global problem we're trying to solve. And I think when you approach something with enthusiasm, with passion, with some foundational knowledge, people are super receptive for you and they want to help you. That was another really interesting, I think, psychological thing that I feel like I tapped into. For most people, when you ask someone for help, they actually want to help you. It kind of turns the tables almost a little bit where someone really feels like they get engaged and want to participate. And I think far too often, especially with entrepreneurs, we're afraid to ask for help. And it's really important to understand that dynamic that when you ask someone for help, it's almost like the power shifts a little bit because then people want to help you. It's this human nature thing that I've certainly experienced, at least in my connecting with people in this space.
When you talked about the idea that, I mean, you throw it out to the world, the universe, and people come back to you, and you said some people would say it's a horrible idea, don't go after it. In those kind of conversations, and I think it's very hard to take basically nuggets from someone that's being negative, even if it's in a positive way of being negative. For yourself, in those kind of situations, would you try to sell them on why it's a good idea, or you just allow them to talk?
So I think in the beginning, and I think this is probably true for a lot of us, when you're really excited about this business that you're starting, you default to defending yourself. And I think it was something I eventually had to mature past because defending your position and just kind of, reinforcing what you're saying and not really listening, you're missing an opportunity. And I think for me, I definitely started that way, right? I think we all do, is that you're so excited about what you're doing when someone tells you or disagrees with you, you want to debate them about it more than you want to listen to them. But the more, I think it was an early discussion with a physician who basically was challenging the ability to deliver an impactful program online. And it was a combination of technology adoption plus working in a successful manner that you could avoid injuries, you could get a certain level of challenge to get outcomes. And I started to really listen to what they were saying and started to just ask questions rather than defend myself, rather than just talk over them with why my idea was so good and they weren't listening. I did the opposite. I just wanted to really understand why they felt that way. What were their experiences? And then change the narrative of the conversation into, this is really, really insightful. Thanks for sharing. What would you do to combat that? Right. So if you really believe that exercising in an online fashion is not going to get outcomes, how could you ensure that you were getting outcomes? Or if that technology was going to be a problem, how could you make this, strip it down to be easier to engage with a technology solution? And it's funny when people feel heard, even when they disagree with you, and you start to ask them probing, open-ended questions like that, they actually get more engaged and they start to become your ally, right? Again, you're engaging them as a part of this problem-solving discussion rather than disagreeing with them. And so that became a really, I think, good tactic for really lean into those moments where people don't agree with you. Because if you can start to drill into the reasons why and start to work through that process with them, you'll end up finding that you can move a lot further with their assistance than just this, disagreement. That is the easier way to go. And so I had a really impactful conversation with a physician that was challenging me on some of the fundamental principles of the business. And the culmination of that conversation was I felt so much more prepared for additional conversations because of what they had told me and really started to influence what our program would be.
Well, thank you, Eric, for being on the Road to Growth podcast today. I'm going to finish off with this hard hitting question, this last question. Okay. What, for someone older than 55, what would you say is the best workout they could do at home? Whatever it is, it could be a push up, jumping jack, whatever it is. What would you say would be the best item they can do at home?
So I'm going to give you three, and
Okay.
I refer to this as the holy trinity of fitness. If you do these three things, every day for the rest of your life, you will be in a really good position to age well. Those are push-ups, squats, and planks. And here's the amazing thing about each one of those 3 exercises: push-ups, chair stands, and planks, or squats, excuse me, and planks, is they're all modifiable for anyone, regardless of your fitness level. So I'll talk about a push-up as an example. When I say the word push-up, you probably have a mental image of someone getting on the floor on their toes and doing a kind of traditional push-up. That's one way to do a push-up. For a lot of older adults, they may not feel comfortable doing that, may not be able to get off of the floor. So we don't want to put them on the floor. There's a modified version of a push-up that you can do off the back of a chair or off a counter, where you move your feet back a little bit and you're not on the floor. Your angle is not this, it's this. It's a little bit easier to do. And it's something that can still create challenge and have outcomes. And some people can't even do that. So you can actually stand against a wall, take a step or 2 back, and do a push-up against a wall. And almost anybody can do that. So you can incorporate push-ups into your life on a daily basis, regardless of your age or fitness level. And then what you want to do is understand that it has to be a little bit challenging to get you to make progress, to get you stronger. That's what our body responds to. So if something is too easy, you need to make it a little bit more challenging. So we want to progress people through this kind of those different versions of an exercise. So if you're do wall push-ups, if that's where you need to start, and progress to push-ups off the back of a chair or a counter. And then maybe you can progress to push-ups on the floor on your knees instead of your toes, and ultimately to your toes. Likewise with squats. A squat can be hard for a lot of older adults. Start with a chair stand, standing up out of a chair, right? And if that's hard, you can put a pillow down, you can put a cushion and elevate the angle, make it higher so it's easier to get out of that chair. Make it so it's something you're comfortable doing somewhere between 8 and 12 or 8 and 15 times, and then start to push yourself on a regular, but it's really push-ups, squats, planks. Those are kind of the holy trinity of exercises to do every day for the rest of your life, and really, change the way that you age.
Well, again, thank you, Eric, for being here. Hopefully everyone listening got some great information. If you haven't started your fitness journey, it's never too late. You can start today. Go in the show notes, go look up Vivo. If you're not 55, maybe you're 54, they probably make some exceptions. So don't worry about that. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, please share, and go find Eric. Bye, everyone.